Good morning. Our lesson today has to do with love, like the song we sang, and it's love acts like God. Now, that's you need to know something. You're never going to act like God. You'd have traits of your actions that would be like God. But God is so much higher. So I'm going to give you an unlikely passage to begin with. It's Isaiah 55, verses 8 and 9, which says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." So no matter how, I'll say, knowledgeable we might get, we'll never reach God's standard. Not for us, but for Him. We'll never be equal to God in anything. But when we consider God's love in our lives, it needs to be considered as a very high thing. Now, I'm comparing that to Isaiah there. Not like the earth, not like the world. It is at a higher level of love and a higher level of expectancy of everything. It's higher. In 1 Corinthians 13, Paul gives us those examples of love. We're not going to look at that today. You've done that. But that tells us that love always seeks the best for everybody else around. Always does. And so when I come across some hard knot that I have to love, I have to go to my spiritual side and say, "Lord, help me." And I can't tell you how many times I have to do that. We can never raise to the level of God. We'll never get there. No matter how hard we try, no matter how good we get, we'll never get there. And if I'm left to my own self, my own directions, my own desires, I'll look a whole lot more like Satan than I will God. Yeah. God's love is a learning process. It's not something you become a Christian, you flip a switch and you got it made. No, it doesn't work that way. It's a learning process. And we have to develop God's passion one step at a time. We see how God acts. We see how God puts opportunities in front of us. And sometimes we're good at it. Sometimes we fail at it. I had something happen to me yesterday. And I felt like a total failure. And yet, I did what I thought God would have me to do. But it didn't work out the way I had wanted it to, and it didn't work out the way I thought it should have. It's hard to learn to forgive as God does. And that's a learning process. In Romans chapter 5, it says there that God sent Jesus to die for us while we were yet sinners. Another verse dealing with that same topic in that same chapter says He sent Him to die for us while we were His enemies in order to reconcile us back to God. My forgiveness of you is, yeah, I forgive you this time. Don't do that again. God doesn't say that. I'll forgive you again. You've asked me once. Do you remember asking me to forgive you before? God doesn't do that. Oh, okay. One more time, I'm going to forgive you. Do not do that again. God doesn't do that. And I'm so weak at that. Then there's humbling ourselves as servants. It is an important aspect of Christianity that we take upon us to be a servant. a lot of people who go to church, who count themselves faithful, who are regular, and they wouldn't serve anybody. And if I'm going to be a disciple of Jesus, I've got to be a servant. We're going to talk about that a little bit in a minute. And it is a huge decision to chase reconciliation. Now, if you, I'm not going to give you any more aspects of God's love, but if you look at this, we have to develop, we have to learn, we have to become, we have to make a decision. All of these are on purpose. They're not something that just happens to us. They are things that happen to us because we decide this is the kind of person I'm going to be. We decide that. And again, it's not like flipping a light switch. It happens slowly. It is important also for us to recognize that we are called out of the world. Understand, He did not call me out of the world just for me to be out of the world. But He called me out of the world because He has a purpose for me. And I hear people all the time, I just don't have anything to do. What? And there are other people who will say, I don't have any clue why I'm still alive and here. What? I talked to a man last night on the phone. I thought he was fixing to commit suicide. And I picked up he texted me a message. And I picked up that phone, I called him, I said, what's going on? He said, I don't have anything to live for. It's over. I'm done. I'm finished. I said, what do you mean? You're still a young man. I said, did you get up this morning? Well, God blessed you. And I started going through things that God has touched his life with and blessed him with. And before I got off with him, he was not crying anymore. He was bawling his eyes out when he answered the phone. That's a 30-minute conversation. I don't know why I got the text. I don't know what all is going on in his life. But there was a purpose put there for me on that occasion. And if we will open our eyes, God does that for us every single day. There is a purpose. You didn't come here today accidentally. You came here because you wanted to worship God. You knew there was a thing that you should do. So you're here for God's purpose. Me to be called out of the world to recognize my purpose requires self-control and determination. I could have gotten that text yesterday and said, not going to do anything with that. And I got one the other day, and I did do something with my little devotions that I send out every night. A woman texted me back, and she said, I lost my husband a year ago. Last month, I lost my son. And then she goes into other stuff that's happening in her lives where she lost her home and she lost all of her, she broke and all this kind of stuff. And I'm thinking, yeah. So I go out and I look at it and it looks like it's a scam, okay? Do I know that? No, I don't. I texted her back a prayer. That's about all I could do. She's in Maine. I'm in Tennessee. That's about all I could do. But it requires determination. No matter what comes my way, no matter how awful it is, I'm going to try to answer it with the equipment that God has given me and equipped me for to take care of it. Self-control and determination. Now, when you do this, and you see the love of God upon you and you respond to it, accepting the responsibilities that he's given you in it, the world is going to think you're crazy. And they'll say things like, Why are you keep helping this person? Y'all know who I'm talking about. I've had no telling how many people to say, why are you doing that? I had a man to tell me if I didn't quit doing that, he would no longer be of service to me. And I hire him to do certain things. Now, I'm sorry. God has got a purpose. And to show his love requires us to do things that the world thinks we're crazy. Peter wrote about it in 1 Peter chapter 4, wherein they think it's strange that you not run with them to the same excess of right, and they'll speak evil of you. And it happens all the time. When you embrace the love of God and the lifestyle that he requires in that love, they're going to think you're crazy. They're going to poke fun at you. They're going to say evil things about you. They're going to tell you how crazy you are. They're going to shun you. They're going to separate themselves from you. Guess what? If I fulfill the purpose for which I've been called out of the world in, I don't have any choice. And they've either got to get over it and be my friend, or they got to go. That's the choices. Because number one, I accept the love of God on me, and I will try to live that lifestyle. That's what we're called to do. So now let's understand the God's love. And God's love is above all things else sacrificial and unconditional. The sacrificial is seen in John 3:16. The unconditional is seen in he sends the rain on the just and the unjust. He still shows his love even though people deny him, won't live for him. He still sends that to them. It doesn't mean that he's going to save them, no. It doesn't mean that they're his special people, no. But they still get the love of God. And what that means is, it means we will never, ever give up. When we have someone that we feel a duty to help, we're going to do it. And you know what our case is. We're going to do it. Our thought process is not the world's. It's God. His ways are higher than our ways. And if we're going to be his, we've got to start elevating ourselves above the world. Sacrificial. It's going to cost us something. Unconditional. That's who we are. It's who we become. In Ephesians chapter 3, verses 18 and 19, Paul's writing about love here. He's in the list of the blessings that God has given to us. Scott did a wonderful job with this passage. May be able to comprehend with all saints what is the breadth and the length and the depth and the height. Height, breadth, length, what of what? Of God's love. He bestows it upon you. And what Paul is trying to get across to you here is simply that you cannot measure, you cannot limit God's love. That passage goes on to say, and to know the love of Christ, which passes all understanding, that you might be filled with the fullness of God. Three things there. Number one, we can know the love of Christ because of what he's done for us, because of what he's doing for us, and because of what he's promised to do for us in the judgment. You know the love of Christ. Secondly, if you go with human understanding, there is no way you can grasp that. It's too deep. It's too high. It's too long. It's too wide. You can't handle that with your little bitty minds. One of the things I tried to get across to the church at Springville this morning, we were studying Romans chapter 6 and in the section there about baptism. And something I found in that I'd never seen before. He says, no. There are some things about your baptism that Paul says, Christian, you should know. And one of the things is that you don't know how precious it is to have all of your sins forgiven. And for God to have placed you in the church where He saves people, and for Him to put you such that He will not charge you with sin. He says, and since you were baptized into His death and raised with Him, reckon yourselves also to be alive unto God. In that Christ dies no more, you will never die again. And here Paul says, that's nothing but God's love. Nothing but God's love. We'll never give up. Servanthood. Matthew chapter 10, verse 45. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give His life a ransom for many. Now, Jesus, who is God, came to earth not to be served. You remember Mary and Martha? I believe it was Martha that was cumbered about serving. And Jesus told her, Mary has chosen the good thing. She wasn't serving Jesus. She was sitting at His feet listening to Him. And it wasn't about serving. If Christ came into my home physically, what would I do? Do you want? Can I get? Can I help? That'd be what I'd be about. But the good part is to listen to Him. And to listen to Him, He became our example in servanthood. It's found in John 6, verse 38. For I have come down from heaven not to do my will, but the will of Him who sent me. Do you remember what He said to His mother at the age of 12? How come you're looking for me? Don't you know I must be about my Father's business? Now, I'm sure He loved Mary and Joseph. I know He did because He loves everybody. But I know He had a special love for them and their home. But it's time to be about something else. Not about home. And sometimes we get wrapped up in the something else's of our lives and forget about serving others. This is done in humility. And we are called there to serve others. And I have Matthew 25 there as the example. And Matthew 25 is a picture of the judgment. You're not going to find in Matthew 25 anything that says, did you go to the Church of Christ? You're not going to find anything there that says, did you sing without instruments of music? You're not going to find anything there that has anything to do with doctrine or it has anything to do with a building or with a society. You're going to find there, did you serve others? I was hungry and you fed me or you didn't. I was naked and you clothed me or you didn't. I was sick and you visited me or you didn't. I was in prison and you visited me or you didn't. In humility, our call by the love of God is a call to serve others. This service reflects the selflessness of Christ. It's found in Luke chapter 6, verses 27 and 28. He says, love your enemies Do good to those that hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. And don't you know if we follow that, the world is going to say, you're crazy. I saw what they did to you, and you're forgiving them. I saw what they did, and you're helping them. I've got a little talk I've got to have with Tommy. He feels like they've mistreated him and so on, but he's got to come into this love of God. He's got to love those people even though they hate his guts, and they show it. It's Then their last one's reconciliation. Matthew chapter 5, verses 23 through 24, Jesus says, "Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift at the front of the altar, and go and be reconciled to your brother, and then come back and offer your gift." Let me boil that down into Henry County language. If I remember that somebody has something against me, it's important for me not to come here to worship. It's important for me to go get that fixed. That's what God says. Go fix what is between you and someone else first, and then come and worship. And he didn't say this, but the indication is that my worship will not be acceptable until I do. Now, is that heavy or not? How does that fit in the love of God? Well, God desires reconciliation with his creation. In Romans chapter 5, verse 10, it says, "While you were enemies, you were reconciled to God by the death of his Son. Much more now that we are reconciled, shall we be saved by his life." While I was God's enemy, Jesus died for me. And it was God reconciling the world unto himself. He's going to say later on in the book of Romans. My reconciling with my brother is important to God, because we're called out of the world. We're not like anybody else. We have the love of God upon us and in us. And this requires us to humble ourselves, bring ourselves down, because quite frankly, it's hard for me to go and tell you, I wronged you and I'm sorry. That's just hard to do. It's hard for me to go and to apologize to someone and say, I'm sorry I did this. I'll use Willa as an example. The other day she came in our Bible study and she said, I feel, and she used a word, I forgot what the word was, but it meant upset or shunned or something of that nature because of what you said or what you did. I didn't know I did that. That's the first thing. I said, well, I'm sorry. And I kind of laughed at it, and she told me it wasn't funny. Well, it's not funny. Willa's right. She's right. But to bring ourselves down so that we admit I was wrong, sometimes it's very hard. Let's bring it together now so you get a lesson out of this. I ranted and I raved and gone this way and that way. And by the way, I want to apologize to y'all for last Sunday's length of the lesson. It was 37 minutes and 28 seconds. Yeah. This is not going to be that long. By loving, we are aligning our ways with God's ways, and it's not with the world. And the more we love, the greater discrepancy there will be between us and the world. There will be a big difference in us. And that's what God wants. Because he says, my ways are not your ways. And I've got to learn God's ways, his love, and how he's loved me. And I've got to be aware of what he's done for me and continually call that up into my remembrance, because his ways are not my ways. And my task is to make my ways more like his. But that's not normal. That's just not human. That's not the way we're programmed. So I can't do that on my own. Let us ask God for help in seeing his love and seeing what he's doing out of love for me, so I can put that in my character and carry that in the world. That will allow me to serve him and to love him just as he's done me. And I wish I had had time to research this. How many times does God tell me, you need to do this because what I've done for you? And it's in the Old Testament, it's in the New Testament. Love's a heart matter. And so with this lesson on the love of God, what I'm asking you is, where's your heart? Where is your heart? Because God's love in us, he's in us, his love is in us, but it's in us for a purpose, and it is to put into action to love other people. That's how we change the world. That's how we make converts. That's how we grow this church with his love.